Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and I apologize first and foremost for the lighting in here. This is actually my movie room, so everything is painted to look dark, and I tried to lighten it up and everything, but whatever. It is what it is. And so yeah, it's been quite a minute since I last updated, and my last video I mentioned I was going to pharmacy school. So as you can imagine, that's had me a little bit busy, and it was very busy. So just to kind of tell you how things were going, I worked 2 jobs while I was going to school. I had 17 hours of class. I think it was 17. It was 17 or 18. I don't know. It was up there, of class hours. And then plus I had my job where I worked in the morning. I'd go there at like 6 in the morning and then go to class at like 9 o'clock. So I'd work like 3 hours in the morning every morning at one place, and then I actually worked on campus as a adjunct chemistry lab instructor. So at least I was on campus, so that made it a little bit easier. But still, working 2 jobs is never easy when you're going to school, let alone pharmacy school. So at any rate, if you're considering going to pharmacy school, whether you're in high school, thinking about going to pharmacy school, or if you're already an adult, or if you've already gotten your bachelor's degree somewhere else, or whatever it may be, this video is to highlight my experiences with my first semester as a P1 student and what you might expect in your first year. So anyway, as far as my background, I don't even remember if I've talked about this or not, but regardless, I got my bachelor's degree a long time ago, so I'm actually one of the older people in my class, which is fine. It's it is what it is. But I got my bachelor's degree a long time ago, and then while I was working at one of my jobs, I got my master's degree. So that happened in 2017. So they considered me a good candidate because I had all this work experience at a research company, and then I had all the different degrees, and my focus was specifically on pharmacy because the research and development I was doing was in pharmacy. So I had a little bit of a leg up in that department, but that doesn't mean that, if you don't have my background, that's, whatever. But anyway, so I knew it was going to be difficult. I think there were a lot of things that really changed about how I approach my education during this past semester, which, that's fine too, because we're always growing and we're always changing. But I will say that going into this, I was really accustomed to having, my science GPA was actually a 4.0. So I was accustomed to having straight A science GPA. This is my science GPA, not my total GPA. So I didn't do really well in some of those computer classes and whatever. Even though I'm good with computers, I'm just not great with some of that other computer stuff. But anyway, so yeah, I had a 4.0 science GPA. So I expected to put some effort into this, but not have to put my life into it. So when I did my master's degree, I studied for it, and it was difficult, but I still obviously came out with a decent grade because that was also factored into my science GPA. I did pretty decent on the PCAT, whatever, all this stuff. Well, ultimately, I ended up with straight B's, which is, totally fine. I mean, I got an A or I got 2 A's in 2 classes. And then I got B's in the rest, which in actuality, there's a B plus here, a B minus there, a straight B here, an A minus there. It's just at pharmacy school, and this is specific for my school, which I would assume is pretty congruent among the pharmacy schools, is that the pluses and minuses matter. So when you're calculating your GPA, they do have different point scales for those. So for example, a straight A would be 4 points, right? An A minus would be 3.7 points. So on and so forth. So a B minus is actually below, I think it's a 2.7. So you're talking C scale kind of from what you're probably accustomed to. But at any rate, I guess one of the main takeaways here is that the school is difficult, and depending on what school you're going to, from what I understand, my particular school is one of those that there was an article that came out recently that said it had a high return on investment. So basically what that tells me is that they really ream you hard in this school. So there are some schools that when you're out looking for a job, where they'll say like, I only know of one school for an example, and that would be like Purdue, which is in Indiana. So if somebody graduates from Purdue with like a 2.7 average GPA, which is, like a solid C average, that would be considered more highly than, say, like a 3.5 up from like some other school that's just not as either well known or just doesn't have the academic chops, that Purdue has. So I feel like my school is kind of in the same boat with Purdue, which is a good thing. I didn't know that going into the school, but it's kind of nice knowing that. And it's also nice knowing that I did pretty decently considering, especially being as old as I am and having the two jobs and, just not being accustomed to this kind of rigorous schedule. So now that I know what to expect with that, I'm hoping next semester will be a little bit better. So at any rate, so the first thing to consider is if you're accustomed to getting really great grades and, and that's wonderful and that's great, don't be disappointed if you don't get straight A's. Let me just put it that way. And another thing I'll mention, which, it's not as big a deal for me, but it's kind of a big deal for, I think, a lot of people, is that if you are doing really well, don't rub it in people's faces. There are a couple, well, I don't want to say a couple, there's a particular student that takes some joy in rubbing their grade in other people's faces, which is kind of like, I'm happy for you, that's great, but just because you have educational, like, book skills doesn't mean you have people skills, which is kind of what's important with the pharmacy degree. You need to be able to work with people. So I feel like that is probably more important than you being able to rattle off, all the different hormones responsible for, taking a pee. It's just, anyway, my tangent. But, like I said, I don't really care, and that's fine. You can gloat about it, whatever. But my point is don't be upset if you don't get an A. Just, you could be great at the subject, and I actually learned a lot. One of the classes I was really, really struggling in, which I thought I was going to get a C in, and I ended up pulling out a B in it. No minus, no plus, just straight solid B. I actually learned a lot in that class, and there's something to be said for that, considering that I didn't do great on the test, but I knew my stuff. It's just whatever. So that leads me to my second point. In this particular school, and it's probably true for a lot of schools, is that the tests are not straightforward. They are meant to make you think and think outside of the box and try to come up with solutions. So they're not just having you memorize things and then rattle stuff off. It's like they'll teach you, say, the basics of, I'll give you an example. In my immunization class, we were talking about, how different antibodies are formed on the cells and, like, cell mediated immunity and all that stuff. And how our antibodies are formed, and it's genetic and all that stuff. And you get all these enzymes. You have, like, the RAG1, RAG2, which is, I don't know if you guys have heard of the boy in the plastic bubble, but he was actually lacking the RAG1, RAG2, which is very crucial to your immune system. So where they would give you the information and say, like, this is responsible for coding this part of your antibody, or, this gives you the diversity of your antibody, and this enzyme does this, and blah, 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 blah. On your test, it'll be like, patient A has a severe deficiency in this enzyme. What is going to happen downstream of that? And they'll give you a bunch of options, and they're all going to sound equally valid. And that's the hard part about these tests. You really have to think about the direct impact some of these things are going to have. Now, is that going to, help me vaccinate people or look at a prescription and dole out medications? No, but I mean, it's great to have these base understandings because another thing that you should really know about pharmacy is that a lot of vaccinations are moving more and more towards a pharmacist's duty. So vaccinations, it's very important to understand like immune responses to vaccinations, or what vaccinations do for you, and what kind of schedules the children have to be on, what adults have to be on. If they're immunocompromised, can you not use this? So it's a lot of intense information. And with that being said, that leads me into my next point, is that a lot of people will not understand that a pharmacist is given about as much information as a doctor. So doctors are meant to be like practitioners and prognosis and diagnosis and all that stuff. Whereas the pharmacist is supposed to be the expert in the drugs. So while doctors have knowledge of drugs and like what's coming out and what's good for this and what's good for that, a lot of times they don't understand the interactions that these drugs will have, and the dangers that they can pose if they're mixed or whatever. I actually my mom years ago had a contraindication with 2 of her medications, and it was causing her problems, but her doctor didn't think twice about that. So while some people may scoff at pharmacy as a profession, and maybe think it just, you're just counting pills, and it's way more than that. It really is. And I'll be honest, when I went to school, I thought, how many different ways are they going to teach us how to interact with patients and count pills, So it's a lot more than that, and that's a good thing. I'm glad that it's more rigorous than I anticipated it to be. So anyway, one thing, which is another thing to prepare you for your first semester, is make sure your vaccinations are up to date. I ran into that issue, and I couldn't register for next semester because I had some issues with my vaccination. So I was vaccinated back in the 70s and 80s-ish, and our records weren't electronic. So my mom had this little card that had, handwritten information that my doctor had on there, and it wasn't enough. I mean, there had to be more proof, like my MMR. So the vaccine schedule for MMRs, you got to have like 2 of them, spaced apart so much. Well, my card only had 1 listed, so they didn't count my MMR because I only had the 1. So I had to go get blood work done to show them that I had the antibodies for MMR, which I did, which is fine, but that takes time. When they draw your blood, it takes like a week and a half for them to get you the results back. And the same thing happened with chickenpox. So I had chickenpox when I was a kid, which was normal when I was a kid, but then they developed the vaccine in like, I think the late 80s, which I had already had the chickenpox, so I was already, I already had the antibodies and whatever, so I had to get the titer done to show them, hey, I already had the chickenpox. I had to get an updated tetanus vaccine. Hepatitis B I didn't have because that was developed after my whole immunization schedule when I was a kid. So I felt like a pincushion. Back in October, I was just being stabbed left and right with like all these different things. Plus I had to get a TB test. So that's another thing. There's a lot of different things that the school's going to require of you to actually just be a part of the program. So you're going to have all these vaccinations. You're going to have to do a drug test every year. You're going to have a TB test done every year. You're going to have basic life support training, and I think that's every 2 years. You have to get I don't even know what it's called, but it's like insurance, pharmacy insurance. So like whenever you're doing like rotations, you have to be liability insured for that. And then you also have to have your license to be a student pharmacist because you're going to be on rotations. So all these things work together, and I kind of lump them together in the same category because at my school it's under the same department. So they manage all that stuff under the same department. So yeah, but anyway, so since I was considered a transfer student, and I was really late to the game, it was just a lot of, I actually was this close to calling the hospital I was born in Iowa, just to be like, do you have my immunization records? Because we couldn't find them. But my mom found the card, and like I said, the only thing that it really worked for was the polio vaccine. So, and that's fine. And I guess the kind of sort of the MMR. But, so I guess another thing that is good to know, at least at my school, and again, I don't know if this is ubiquitous among all pharmacy schools, because I know that another school near me is not this way. But so my particular school is kind of dedicated to pharmacy, although it is also expanding its offerings. So it offers a bunch of different bachelor's degrees now, but they're all kind of pharmacy related. But ultimately, this school is like 150 years old, or actually, I think it's even older than that. Yeah, it's even older than that. It's old. But at any rate, they cater to creating pharmacists. So basically, their goal is to get people straight out of high school, and it's like, I think it's a 7-year program. I think they knocked it down to 6. So straight out of high school, you can go here and you're kind of getting your bachelor's degree while you're doing your yeah, I don't even know, because I never did that program. I just know it's like a 7-year program. So like there's definitely for sure 4 years of professional schooling. So you have your P1, P2, P3, and P4 years. So I just finished my P1 first semester. So those 2 or 3 other years are like all the background stuff that you have to get if you start at this school with the intent of doing it at the school, the whole program. But I'm considered a transfer student because I got my bachelor's degree elsewhere, and there's like about 30 of us, I think, at the school. So one of the things that I've learned here is that there's kind of a unspoken stigma against transfer students. I don't want to say that it's a live and kicking stigma. I think it's just kind of a simmering one, because I think back in the day they didn't even allow transfer students. It was just kind of like no, this is a pharmacy only. You have to start as a freshman, blah, blah, blah. So if somebody decided after they had already gotten their bachelor's degree that they wanted to do this, and they'd have to start at square one. Whereas they stopped doing that, I want to say like 10 years ago or so, and it's still kind of there, that little stigma. So a lot of us transfer students just kind of stuck together because, we all have the same where we're coming from, basically. A lot of the students that are the traditional students that started there are pretty good. I mean, they're still pretty nice. There are some that straight out don't like us. I guess during one of our lecture classes, me and a couple of the transfer students decided to sit in a different spot. Well, this is like a big auditorium, so I wouldn't think it's a huge deal. People sit in different spots all the time. So we sat there, and I guess we took somebody's spot. So this girl was like flipping out and cursing us to her friends and those transfer students. And I'm just like, oh geez, like I'm too old for this crap. I'm like, whatever. So I didn't care, but my friends were getting kind of riled up about it. And, when I was that age, I probably would have too, but like I said, I stopped caring about that stuff. Life is too short, but that girl's wasting her own energy being angry at us. So, But anyway, that's just something to look out for if your school is one of those traditional schools that starts people at, square one to go through the pharmacy program. If they allow transfer students, there might be a little stigma there, which don't let it bother you. Honestly, for the sake of not making this video too long, I just, wanted to outline a lot of those things there. Again, I was super busy. When I wasn't working, I was studying. And my husband was getting really sad because he's like, I never see you and you're always busy. And that's, one semester down, 3.5 years to go. It'll be all right. So my P4 year is going to be nothing but rotations. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to that. So kind of like, doctors have their residencies. That's kind of what this is. Although pharmacy programs do have actual residencies that you can do to specialize in a specific thing. So like, for example, if you want to go to pediatrics, you have to do a residency. I think it's like a year or two. And I think there's only 2 years total that you have to do residency for any given specialty. So some of them may only require 1 year, some of them require 2. But you have to maintain your trainings and your certifications in that particular discipline. I think it's like every 7 years or something like that. So if you don't want to do that and you just want to work in community pharmacy, just go into a community pharmacy straight out of school, and that's fine. But anyway, P4 year is going to be nothing but rotation. So I'm hoping to get a better understanding of what I ultimately want to do. Truthfully, the pediatrics route does sound pretty interesting because they have a lot of seminars on campus that you can go to, a lot of free food if you go to my school. So take advantage of that. There's so many different groups to join. I know that, so I'm in Missouri-Illinois border, so there's like a Missouri group you can be in. There's an Illinois group. There's a main American Pharmacists Association. There's a national association. There's all these different things, and I would take advantage of some of those groups. Some of them are free. Some of them have a small fee. It's like an annual fee of like $30, which a lot of times they'll just throw it on your student account, and if you have a good student loan, you won't even see it. And, I did want to mention student loans. I would suggest, and this isn't going to become a financial video at all, but I would strongly suggest if you decide to go the student loan route, which, you kind of have to if you don't have the funds, definitely look to see if there's any scholarships. A lot of times the schools will offer scholarships. Like I got a partial scholarship. And I was surprised because, being older, I was like, man, I'm just going to have to fork out 100% of this. But no, they offered me a scholarship, which is great. But the rest of it I funded privately. So I went through Discover Student Loans, which I've had a Discover card since I was 18. So I've been a long time customer of theirs. So I was just like, I'm just going to go that route. But there's private loans all over the place that you can go. I highly recommend that. I have an old government loan from my previous bachelor's degree that I'm still paying off. I don't have a ton left, but it's still just kind of been a pain in my rear since 2005. But anyway, so I'm doing the private loan. Now, the only thing with the private loans is you have choices. If your credit's pretty good, you may have to co-sign with your parents if you're too young, or if you have a spouse, maybe co-sign with your spouse, which is what I did. You can reduce your rate that way. If you have good credit, you will be able to choose what payment options you want to do. So you can either do interest only, which I don't recommend. You could do, gosh, I don't even remember. Maybe I do recommend interest only. I don't remember. Either way, I'm too financially aware of these things that even if I chose interest only, which they would give you a minimum payment of so little, it's like, so the minimum payment just comes straight out of my bank account, which is fine. And then I make sure that I pay an additional amount towards my principal every month, as long as I have the money to do it. So my reasoning for doing this the way I chose is that if I didn't have the extra money to pay towards my student loan in that particular month, I was still paying a minimum payment, which was not very much. So I think it's really important to clean as you go, if that makes sense. So I'm hoping, and granted, no amount of money that I'm putting towards the principal right now is going to be enough to make me debt-free by the time I graduate, but it's going to be a nice chunk in the right direction. So there's one job that I'm not going to be able to have next semester. So that's really cutting into my finances, but that's okay. So, all this will work itself out, and I am not worried about it. So as far as your finances go for your school, I would highly look into the private loans. If you can't do that, if you're too young, sometimes the government loan is just the better way to go. But if you need any more information on that, maybe I'll make a separate video about it. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've done the government loan, but I'll see what kind of information I can come up with and give you a good comparison between them or something like that. But anyway, so I don't want to make this video too long. So if there's anything else that you think I can answer for you as far as getting ready for your first semester at pharmacy school, please let me know. I actually thought about filming a day in the life of a pharmacy student, but it's really freaking boring, so you wouldn't have liked that. It's just, there were days where I literally sat in a lecture for 4 hours in a row. So I had, next semester, my Mondays are going to be pure hell, but we'll make it work. Anyway, well, at the time of this recording, it is actually New Year's Eve, so this is actually going to be posted in the new year, so Happy New Year, and hopefully 2020, a brand new decade, is going to be better than the last. And thanks for listening to my droning. Again, if you have any questions for me, just either make a comment or send me a message or whatever it may be, and I can compile any of these questions and maybe put together another video if you're really interested in anything pharmacy school related. Or if you want me to shut up about pharmacy school and go back to soap making, just let me know. I will talk about whatever you want to talk about. This is just what's going on in my life right now, and it's crazy. And I want to make soap, and I haven't made soap, and I haven't painted, and I'm losing my mind. Not really, but Anyway, so Happy New Year, and I will see you next time. Bye.